the benefits of COVID, if you like, from a regulatory perspective, where I think it showed us all that you can be creative around the way you do things and still get the outcomes that you need as a regulator. I think the other thing that it demonstrated is almost the kind of reality all the time that while you can be creative and do things differently, there's a very powerful urge to put them back to normal as soon as the crisis is averted. I think that happens with all crises. It creates an immediate sort of opportunity to be innovative and think differently, but the effect of that isn't lasting. It's not long lasting unless you put a lot of effort into it. I think the other thing that it did was bring people together and get people to work together really well, both across regimes, and probably the other dimension for me was the balance, the link between policy and operations type activities, where everybody's facing the same problem in my case, an industry, and you're looking for ways to keep it going, but in a safe way or in an environmentally appropriate way or whatever it is. And it kind of created a much more collaboration and camaraderie around it. Then it's over and everybody sees phew and goes back to normal. So you kind of lose the benefits in some ways, or you're not willing to maintain a different approach even though it was successful. In thinking about things that have made a long-term difference as a regulator, one of the things that I would reflect on is the Port and Harbour Marine Safety Code in the maritime domain, where there's a combination of regional councils with harbour masters and port companies and Maritime New Zealand as the national regulator. And historically the relationships between the three parties were somewhat fraught. And the purpose of the code was to bring the three different groups or parties together and develop a Port and Harbour Marine Safety Code to lift up the safety outcomes in ports and harbours, based on sharing expertise across the country between harbour masters, ports and Maritime New Zealand. And it was developed as a voluntary code. Many years ago, actually, one was put in place, but it fell into disrepute, essentially. So then it was refreshed and a much more structure put around its administration and its annual conferences, sharing knowledge, collaborative audit practices across. So people from, somebody from Northland and somebody from Canterbury would join up with somebody from a port, maybe New Plymouth or whatever, and go and do an audit on the safety management system for the port down in Invercargill as a voluntary activity, and the network all developed and worked together, and that still exists, and I think it's been the platform for more recent developments of Maritime New Zealand as a safety regulator taking a broader role in health and safety in the port environment. So I think for me that's a pretty good example of moving away from using the standard tools, regulatory tools on a case-by-case basis, to thinking about the system, bringing people together, getting them to share their knowledge and experience and work together for the greater good. And it also contained explicit acknowledgement that Maritime New Zealand harbour masters as regulators still retained all of their ability to act on a regulatory basis on any of the issues that came up, while maintaining the collaboration around the broader code. I think as a regulator, if you stick to the tried and true track and you're very conservative, I can see why you do that. But if you're willing to take a little bit of a risk, you might get a bigger outcome. And the example that I'd point to there was at the Department of Internal Affairs with the censorship team, as it was then, working to put in place a filter to prevent people from going to websites that housed images of child sexual abuse. And it wasn't done on the basis of a legal power to do that. It was done on a voluntary basis with internet providers developing a code around putting the filter in place and putting safeguards around it, like a group of people that oversaw it and checked on the list of websites, if you like, that were going to be blocked through the filter. And the internet providers chose whether they applied it or not. This is my recollection, most did at the time, and it still exists and it's evolved. And I understand it's still very successful, but it had origins in trying to think about how to make an impact on that terrible problem in a different way to the basic kind of investigation and enforcement of people when you, in whatever method, found them doing what they shouldn't have been doing. It was controversial because it was said to have broken the internet and undermined the principles of the freedom of the internet. But I guess that, I think from the perspective that I had and others involved at the time, was that the positive outcome as a result of that was worth that risk and that controversy. One of the ways that the risk associated with that was managed was by carefully putting in place the building blocks around it so that it could be seen quite clearly as a well thought through, carefully planned and implemented approach with the internet providers and the relevant people in the community that were concerned about these things, and that there was proper oversight of it. So it wasn't the regulator going off and doing something in a carefree fashion, and that there was a group of people that were monitoring how it played out and how it worked, not in a formal legal sense, but so things were wrapped around it that really, I think, made it clear that this was a very legitimate thing to be doing in dealing with quite a terribly difficult regulatory area.